What happens when self-defense is against the law? What happens when the protectors become the predators? What happens when innocents are betrayed? Imagine that 2/3 of all Americans disappear. 170 million people. Or that the countries of Germany, France, and Spain are virtually wiped off the map. 170 million people gone. In the 20th century, that's how many innocents were slaughtered, tortured, starved, mutilated, worked to death, bayoneted, hanged, annihilated at the hands of their governments. They had no means to defend themselves. World War I is underway. A new government has taken power over Turkey's crumbling Ottoman Empire. The rulers say they want to rid the country of wrong and lawless ideas. They want to protect national security. They decide to eliminate the Armenians from Turkey. Eliminate the Armenians by killing the Armenians. In February 1915, Turkey's political leaders and Muslim religious leaders make a detailed secret plan to annihilate the largely Christian minority. To reduce opposition, they lie about their intentions. The rulers proceed step by step. The first move, draft as many Armenian men as possible into the Turkish army. Thousands report for duty. The Armenian soldiers are then separated from their units and sent to labor camps, where they are worked to death, starved, or murdered in groups far out of public view. Not all of the men are gone, however. The next step, confiscate all weapons from Armenian civilians. Finding many guns is not hard. Turkey already has a gun control law requiring gun owners to report themselves to the government. Then comes the order. All Armenians must turn in their guns or face severe penalties. Policemen and soldiers go from house to house, ransacking homes and torturing people to get their guns. Armenians become so afraid of torture that they buy guns from other Turks, just so they can have something for the soldiers and policemen to take away. On June 26, 1915, the final stage of the genocide begins. The government proclamation declares, all Armenians will be deported to remote camps. No exceptions. Armenians have 5 days to get ready. They may bring only what they can carry. Armed guards gather the Armenians, mostly women, children, the old and the sick, into groups of between 200 and 4,000 people to form convoys. The guards force march the Armenians over rough terrain and into the deserts during the hot summer months. People drop from exhaustion, are killed by the guards, or simply left to die. Sometimes the guards shoot or cut to pieces all the Armenians in a convoy. Fewer than 1 in 10 survive the march, and most of the survivors are butchered in the end. The death toll is staggering, as planned. 1.5 million Armenians, men, women, and children, have been eliminated from the earth. 3/4 of the Armenian population of Turkey. In the early 1930s, the outside world believes the Soviet Union is a paradise for workers and peasants. But for millions, that paradise is hell. In those years, the people of Ukraine, the Volga Basin, and the Caucasus are being deliberately starved to death by their own government. The groundwork for that cold-blooded famine was laid when the communists came to power in 1917. Almost immediately, they passed a series of laws, making it nearly impossible for non-party members to own firearms. They used licensing laws to tell them exactly who had guns, and with that information, they confiscated firearms. Penalties for possession of weapons grew more and more harsh. The Soviet leader, Joseph Stalin, fears enemies everywhere, but especially in Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe. Ukraine's prosperous farmers crave independence. Stalin craves their grain to pay for industrial expansion. In 1929, Stalin decrees that all farmland, livestock, and produce in the Soviet Union belong to the state. Farmers are ordered to surrender their land and livestock and move to government-owned collective farms. But first, to terrify the rest into submission, several million of the most prosperous farmers are sent to forced labor or killed outright. These kulaks, as the best farmers are called, are demonized and excluded from society. Armed government thugs steal their property, sneering, "Eat, drink, and be merry, for it all belongs to us." Next, Stalin demands extraordinary quotas of grain, quotas no one could possibly meet, quotas enforced by soldiers with guns. Many farmers rebel. Resistance is fierce. But because of 10 years of firearms confiscations, the helpless people can fight back only with farm tools or sabotage. The worst is still to come. In 1932, Stalin takes the ultimate revenge on those who dared oppose him. Because Stalin controls all food distribution, he can cut off food supplies and starve entire regions. Because he controls all travel with internal passports, his secret police can force starving millions to remain within the devastated lands. Grain elevators stand full, but grain rots on the ground as Stalin refuses to distribute food. The powerless people can do nothing to stop their master. Catastrophe strikes and lasts for 2 endless years. Spies watch for anyone trying to take grain from the fields. Anyone caught hiding food is executed. Desperate families resort to cannibalism. Meanwhile, the New York Times Pulitzer Prize-winning Moscow correspondent Walter Duranty assures the world that there is no famine. And Stalin dupes the world by actually increasing the amount of grain exported from the Soviet Union. The United States and the League of Nations embrace and recognize the prosperous Soviet Union. From Moscow, Times reporter Duranty secretly confides the truth to Western governments, that as many as 10 million defenseless lives have been wiped out, with politically engineered starvation as the murder weapon. Chinese culture is built on obligation and obedience. The individual serves family, society, and state. Law governs the masses, but rulers stand above the law. The people easily become pawns. 20th century China is filled with turmoil and war. In the early years, nationalists vie with communists for political control. By 1935, the nationalist government, now in full power, prohibits private ownership of arms. A person can be punished even if he violates the law unintentionally. But the new laws do not bring peace to the disarmed and obedient citizens of China. 1942 to 44. 4 million die in famines aggravated by government confiscation of crops. 1937 to 1949, the Sino-Japanese War. Men who refuse to be drafted into the army are tortured, mutilated, and killed. Many uncooperative soldiers are shot or starved to death. The toll, another 4 million. And in 1937, there is Nanking. 225,000 Japanese troops advance on the city. 300,000 Chinese soldiers flee, throwing down their weapons in the path of the oncoming Japanese war machine. Hundreds of thousands of children, women, sick, and old people are left to the mercy of a merciless foreign invader. Lacking any tradition of self-defense and forbidden to own firearms, the people of Nanking are cornered and helpless. They are raped, buried alive, burned alive, used for bayonet practice, and forced to watch as their own organs are cut out of them. Even a visiting Nazi observer is horrified. More misery is to come. When the communists take over in 1949, they impose their own laws to discourage and punish firearms ownership. The most harmless forms of gun ownership are forbidden. Yet the communists themselves are lawless under Chairman Mao's drive to produce an ideal society. From the agrarian reforms of the 1950s to the Cultural Revolution near the end of Mao's reign, men, women, and children are treated as tools of the government or as enemies of the state. During 38 long years, communist violence and economic experiments wipe out an additional 35 million Chinese, and possibly as many as 100 million. Chairman Mao said that guns were the ultimate source of all political power. He controlled all the guns. January 1933. Hitler is elected to power in Germany. Because of a gun registration law passed just 5 years earlier, he already knows which Germans own firearms. Nazi government agents combine primitive brutality with modern record-keeping to conduct mass seizures of weapons from political opponents. Violent raids and obedient gun turn-ins also reduce ordinary Germans to helplessness. Within months, the Nazis have firmly consolidated their power. But this is not enough. In 1938, they create their own gun control law. November 1938. Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. Incited by propaganda minister Goebbels and led by Nazi government agents, Germans commit a nationwide attack against the Jews, shattering storefronts, looting property, burning synagogues, committing murder. The day after Kristallnacht, the Nazis forbid Jews to possess any firearm, club, or sharp-edged weapon. Violators face 5 years in a concentration camp. Jews turn in their weapons to the police, or the Nazis storm in after them. Stripped of their power to resist, Germany's Jews await slaughter. Technology helps the Nazis make savagery efficient. Census data and national ID cards tell them exactly who is a Jew. In a few days of terror, between 30,000 and 90,000 Jewish men, mostly community leaders, are arrested and sent to concentration camps. It is the beginning of the final solution. The so-called Jewish problem now being solved, Hitler can focus on preparing for World War. All over Europe, men and women resist the Nazis, but not in Germany, where Hitler is able to